there, it's Jessica Joy. This is my story. Solutions, because I'm a solutions only kind of person. And when your constitution gets hijacked, when did you think it was going to stop? Did you think it was going to stop with abortion? Is abortion natural? Is it neutral? Does it lead to human flourishing? Is abortion secular? Because if it's not natural and it's not neutral and it doesn't lead to human flourishing, and we've been fully allowing abortion to take place, which is one faith-based belief forcing another faith-based belief to commit an act of immorality through coercion of their tax dollars. Yeah, it wasn't just going to stop with abortion. Newsflash. So this is a bill. I have a suitcase back here that is full of tons. Like, this suitcase is like 50 pounds of legislation that I don't have a need to get out, because like, if you don't have the grassroots, then policy, as I've been saying in my videos recently, policy doesn't mean anything. Let's go over this bill, which Texas values. Okay, there's a few Texans that follow me. They haven't read the 7-page letter that Texas Values has been sending out to kill. What is Texas Values? Exactly. Texas Values succubuses millions of dollars out of the state of Texas to, I don't know, to eat filet mignon, because they kill pornography legislation, yet pornography is on their platform. It's really weird. Trust me this. So we used the Freedom of Information Act to obtain that 7-page letter. Yeah, I'm just bringing them up because Texans love their Texas values. Ha! Anywho's, this bill, we're going to talk about gay marriage. Is gay marriage natural? Is it neutral? No, it's controversial. Does it lead to human flourishing? Let me talk to you about, so I'm going to hold this piece of legislation as I talk about natural and neutral. See this water bottle? For this lid, everybody see the lid? For the lid to go onto the water bottle, this is neutral. This is natural. This is not controversial. For this to work out, this is a neutral situation. Just like marriage, and marriage is secular. Marriage is not religious based. It's secular. That's why we also have the Elevated Marriage Act saying that in order to get married, you go through 6 weeks of premarital counseling, and to get unmarried, you go through 6 weeks of end of marriage counseling, because we want to elevate. We want to protect marriage. So for those libertarians who are tuning in, we believe that marriage is secular because it accomplishes the secular goal of human flourishing and reproduction. So marriage is secular. It's secular, not religious in nature. It's not faith-based. It's not self-asserted. It's natural. So this didn't have to go, oh, I think I might fit on top of that water bottle. I think I can. I think I can. No, it's not faith-based. It's not self-asserted. Like, today, I think I'm going to fit on a water bottle. No, it naturally goes onto this water bottle. Here's another water bottle. This lid, like you guys, a lot of your houses, you have a million different kind of lids. Well, this lid was meant for this. This is natural. This is neutral. Is anybody fighting about, like, if you moms, you have like 12 kids in your house, is anybody fighting about the fact that this top goes with this bottom? No, it's a neutral subject. Marriage is a neutral subject. It's not, it's secular. It accomplishes the goal that's set out to do. This water bottle is naturally holding water. This is water. It's holding water. It accomplishes the goal that's not faith-based and it's not self-asserted ideology. So, here's the bill. It's called, it was called the Marriage Restoration Constitution Act. Then it was called the Disentanglement Act. Then the Disentanglement Act became 23 pages because we wanted to separate. We noticed that our entire Constitution got hijacked. The military were funding all those trans hormones, and we're not stopping it. Yeah, how long did you think that there was going to be no God's judgment on that? So here's this House Bill 2320 from Kansas. Go ahead and Google parity marriage in Kansas. Yeah, you're going to see we blew up that state on Valentine's Day. How appropriate. And the House of Representatives' daughter came out on Facebook. I mean, Kansas, I love you guys. So, Disentanglement Act. Whereas civilization, this is a bill saying we are no longer going to fund, enforce, and endorse what is not natural, neutral, nor leads to human flourishing. This is what legislation sounds like. Texas values, lean in. Whereas civilization for millennia have defined marriage as between a man and a woman, and whereas the United States is a constitutional republic that the state of Kansas is now a part of, and whereas the doctrine of preemptive prohibits the state of Kansas from making or enforcing policies that violate the Constitution of the United States, and whereas all the state senators and representatives and all executive judicial officers are bound to an oath of, or affirmation pursuant of article blah 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 free exercise clause. In other words, he's pointing out to legislators that you guys took an oath to uphold the Constitution. So we're starting off this, like most of all of our bills almost start and sound like the same, because we are making representatives remember that they vow to uphold our Constitution, and on a daily basis, our legislators violate the Constitution. So this is the nice way of going, ting, 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 ting. Look, legislator, you're violating the Constitution. Okay, whereas the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States applies to the state of Kansas through the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, and whereas the Constitution of the United States is not silent as to how the state must legally define marriage as acknowledged by the United States Supreme Court, and whereas the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the United States. Okay, so he sets the precedent of you're violating your Constitution. You're enforcing a faith-based, self-asserted ideology. Whereas all religions amount to a set of unproven answers to greater questions like, why are we here? What should we be doing as humans? Whereas the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States was never solely designed to prohibit government from only respecting and recognizing the doctrines of institutionalized religions. Oh, lean in, this part gets good. But non-institutionalized religions like secular humanism. What? Did she say secular humanism? Yeah, so Tucker Carlson, we're not the only ones woke. And whereas the sworn testimonies of ex-gays and medical experts and persecuted Christians and licensed ministers demonstrate that there is no real proof of a gay gene that exists, but that the idea that sexual orientation is predicated on immutability. Okay, what does immutability mean? That means skin color. You can't change it. Huh? The sexual orientation is predicated on immutability is not proven, and that sexual orientation is mythology, dogma, and doctrine or orthodoxy that is inseparably linked to the religion of secular humanism. What is secular humanism? Going forth in the state of Kansas, you can self-identify as a water bottle. You can print out a certification that says, I'm a water bottle. But the state will no longer enforce and endorse and fund that which is not natural, neutral, nor leads to human flourishing. So liberals, you can marry your water bottle. Yes. Oh my gosh, we are in a civil union. I'm so excited to marry. And then tomorrow I'm going to be Mormon, and the next day I'm going to be Catholic, and then I'm going to be Pentecostal. And I can choose whatever faith-based, self-asserted religion and ideology and sexuality I want to. And I can change back the next day. No, but we as a secular nation, I mean, like, we, the nonconformers, should not be forced to commit an act of immorality through coercion of our tax dollars. So let's keep going. Okay, then there's a ton of case law because, like I said, we are on the phone with tons of lawyers all through the night. And those lawyers are paid to get to whatever conclusion you want. That's why I know we could have abolished abortion decades ago. Whereas secular humanism, it is not, is also commonly referred to as postmodern Western individualistic moral relativism, expressive individualism, and by other names is centered on unproven idea that there are no moral absolutes. And whereas the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning LGBTQ WXYZ community is organized full and has a daily code by which the members may guide their daily lives, which makes it a denominational sect that is inseparably part of the religion of secular humanism. And whereas having instead of having a cross and Ten Commandments icon and a star and a crescent, the LGBTQ secular humanist community has the gay pride rainbow of colored flag to symbolize its faith-based worldview. And whereas the idea that a person is born homosexual, or a person can be born in the wrong body, or that a person can come out of an invisible closet and be baptized gay, or that to disagree with homosexual orthodoxy premises makes you a bigot, or are a series of unproven faith-based assumptions and naked assertions that are implicitly explicitly religious and separately linked to the religion of secular humanism, and the government's endorsement of the LGBTQ ideology, and amounts to the greatest sham since the inception of the United States jurisprudence. And whereas in the wake of the government's endorsement of the LGBTQ ideology and the government's endorsement of the LGBTQ secular humanism has not been about tolerance, but dominance. Yes, we're finally saying it. We're finally saying it, Facebook. We're saying it. The endorsement of LGBTQ ideology, the government's endorsement of LGBTQ secular humanism has not been about tolerance. It's about dominance. And whereas in the wake of the government's endorsement of LGBTQ ideology, many citizens who object to the government's endorsement of LGBTQ secular humanism is not based on bigotry, but it's based on biology. Oh my goodness! Did we just write a bill that says that we are going to be based on biology and not bigotry? I can't believe they said that, said the spineless Republican Party. Whereas in the wake of the government's endorsement of the LGBTQ ideology, when a secular humanist says that love is love, what they really mean is that that they are amenable to government's assets being used to oppress and marginalize anyone who disagrees with their beliefs, which is a position that is categorically unloving. Unloving, is that the word that you're going to take down our Constitution with? And whereas in the wake of the government's endorsement of the LGBTQ ideology, we have learned that people who are intolerant of intolerant people are intolerant, and people who are judgmental of judgmental people are judgmental, and people who are dogmatic about not being dogmatic are dogmatic. Your stupid vocabulary words. This is him making fun of their stupid vocabulary words. And whereas in the wake of the government's entailment with the LGBTQ secular humanism, there has not been a land rush on gay marriage, but there has been a land rush by many secular humanists to persecute, let me slow the words down here. There's been a land rush by many secular humanists to persecute many non-observers of the religion of secular humanism. And whereas in the wake of the government's endorsement of LGBTQ secular humanism, there's not been a land rush. There's not been a land rush by many secular humanists. There has been a land rush to infiltrate our public schools and our public libraries with the intent to indoctrinate and proselytize. I had to look up this word. Proselytize minors. That they have been indoctrinating our children, minors, to their religious worldview of faith, morality, sex, and marriage, and with the government's stamp of approval and with coercion of our tax dollars, we're being forced to commit a sin. And whereas there are no such thing as ex-blacks, I'm just going to let this one sit for a while, because once I got lost and I ended up at a black church and they kept office hours, and I was like, I think I'm at the wrong church. And then I told them about this bill. I'm like, do you realize this is the biggest insult? Gay marriage is the biggest insult to the civil rights movement. Hold my Corona. Whereas there are no ex-black. Let me stop and take a pause. I have slept with just as many girls as I have boys. So, if you don't know who I am, I ran a brothel. Yeah. Went to the nation's top faith-based sex trafficking recovery. So when you're like, oh, look at her acting holier than thou. No, I am the face in the story of redemption. I'm also the face in the story of the wages of sin is death. Why? Because all my friends are dead. Who else can talk about this one? So, line 28, whereas there are no ex-blacks, but there are thousands of ex-gays, and whereas the skin tone is genetic and sexual orientation is faith-based. Oh, did she say that? Let me slow down these two sentences once again. Whereas line 28 of this awesome bill, which Texas Values kills, because Texas, I have no idea what, focus on the family policy lines, worthless. Look them up. They take millions from the church. They are paid Judas. They took our place. We need to run back in. Get these people out of... Whereas there are no ex-blacks, there are thousands of ex-gays, and whereas skin tone is genetic and sexual orientation is faith-based, and whereas those who seek to end the government's unconstitutional entailment with the LGBTQ secular humanist religion are defending the integrity of the civil rights movement led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from an emotional ploy. What? From an emotional ploy and an unprincipled misapplication of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, and And line 37, whereas for any person to suggest that homosexual civil rights movement, which is not based on immutability or genetics, is equal to the race-based civil rights movement, which has actually been based on immutability and genetics. I'm just like letting that one lay. Whereas for any person to suggest that homosexual civil rights movement, which is not based on immutability or genetics, is equal to the race-based civil rights movement, which has actually been based on immutability and genetics, has engaged in an act of fraud. This is a bill that was printed in newspapers. Oh my gosh. Like, my Google alerts went off and it was on Valentine's Day. So when I say I love Valentine's Day, that is because we drop most of our bills on Valentine's Day. Okay. For any person to suggest that homosexual civil rights movement, which is not based on immutability or genetics, is equal to the race-based civil rights movement, which was actually based on immutability and genetics, has engaged in an act of fraud and racial animus in kind that is intellectually, emotionally, sexually, and racially exploitive. And whereas people of color at one point in this country had to ride, stay tuned. Please tag those people who are so fiendy. No. Please let those people know they're like, wait a minute, has our Constitution been hijacked? Yes, this video is for those who are wondering if our Constitution got hijacked. Did you think they were going to stop at abortion? Forcing us to commit an act of immorality through coercion of our tax dollars? That's been going on for decades. You think it was going to stop? In the back of the bus, walk to school and drink from colored water fountains. And for anyone to equate the race-based civil rights plight to the goal of the many secular humanists to entangle the government with their religion is a per se act of racial animus that is deeply offensive to many of those people who live in Kansas. I miss you, Kansas. One of my favorite host homes is in Topeka. Love them. And whereas parity marriages, oh, I love this word, parity marriage. Every time that we would say the word parity marriage to a legislator, their face would go. Whereas parity marriages have never been a part of the American tradition and heritage and have nothing to do with a substantive due process clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. And whereas, line 10 of page 4, whereas it is a long-standing government principle that emotional appeals of sincerity or belief do not allow the state of Kansas, he went there, to usurp the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, or for devout secular humanists to entangle our government with their LGBTQ secular humanism. And, line 15, and whereas the history of parity marriages, yes, we said it. The history of parity marriages is that most forms were illegal until recently, or they remain illegal till today, and they continue to erode community standards of decency. And whereas all forms of parity marriage equally erode community standards of decency, and, we went there, those were bold words when this bill was written. And now that you guys have read over the Black Lives Matter, like they hate the nuclear family, now this doesn't look that psychotic. They want to destroy the nuclear family. So when this says, let me slow this down, all forms of parity marriage equally erode community standards of decency, Black Lives Matter says they hate the nuclear family. They are for eroding community standards of decency. They can't argue against this because it's like in their bylaws. Whereas the state of Kansas has a compelling interest to uphold community standards of decency as set forth under the Constitution of the Constitution of the state of Kansas, and in accordance to the findings of the United States Supreme Court. And whereas community standards of decency do not evolve. What? Let me say that again. Whereas community standards of decency do not evolve. What? Say it like a rapper. Whereas the community standards of decency do not evolve. The Constitution is not outdated. It's good enough for today, folks. But people can become desensitized. And whereas the enforcement of marriage policies between a man and a woman do not erode community standards of decency. Let me say it again. This being secular in nature, not religious, fulfilling its duty in life. Yes, this is natural. This is neutral. This leads to human flourishing. This cap screws onto this water bottle. Moms with all of your 12 children, let's go ahead and talk about, is this natural? Is this neutral? Yeah, nobody's fighting over this lid goes to this bottle. Yeah, this is natural. This is neutral. And this accomplishes the goal that it's set out to do. But all my libertarians are like, well, let's just get out of the marriage business altogether. Marriage is secular. There should be benefits. We should protect the family. We should have the Elevated Marriage Act. What's the Elevated Marriage Act? If you're just tuning in, the Elevated Marriage Act is where you have 6 months of premarital counseling to get into marriage, and you have 6 months of premarital counseling to get out of marriage. That we elevate and we protect the family unit. So whereas this bill looked like it was written by lunatics 4 years ago, no, this bill looks like the most sanest thing to ever speak. And I would love to speak this on a stage. Oh, I read this bill in front of a state house all by myself with my camera, and I just felt so powerful. Like prophetic. Oh, we get to conversion therapy. Oh, it's going to be good. Whereas the legislative branch, line 3, whereas the legislative branch may sever as a check on the judicial executive branches, and where the decision of Obergefell versus Hodges was called egotistic judicial putsch. I looked up the word putsch. You guys remember, I have a high school education. Putsch is a violent overthrow. Egotistic judicial putsch that causes secular humanists in office to constitute a threat to American democracy by dissenting Supreme Court justices. And whereas, okay, he keeps going. Stare decisis does not keep Obergefell versus Hodges from being overruled, because stare decisis is at its weakest when the court is asked to interpret the Constitution of the United States, and because questions which merely lurk in the record, neither brought to attention of the court nor ruled upon, are not to be considered as having been so decided as to constitute precedence. Yeah, precedence is like a big deal. Okay, so he goes on. Okay, then he goes down to community standards of decency means a standard based on reasonable observers' perspective. Okay, so community standards of decency. Yes, let's go over this. Means a standard based on reasonable observers' perspective. When I showed you guys the sex education that is going to be, it's mandatory, K through 12, the week before we were in quarantine, that was signed into law by the governor that Monday, right before quarantine. Tell me the God's not about judgment. Tell me, because that Wednesday is when the Senate leader in Oklahoma joked about abolishing abortion. We were closed the next week. God don't play. He's done. He is done. He turned them over to their sin. Have fun. You guys say hello to the angry bees. Angry bees. Conversion therapy. Okay, so in many of our bills, we have the definitions either at the forefront, like the front, or the back. Because why? Our definitions have been hijacked. So conversion therapy. Conversion therapy means a therapeutic practice in which the licensed mental health expert acting under authorized consent assists clients in the goal of realigning such clients' sexual preference to preferred members of opposite sex who have corresponding reproductive anatomy. Oh, okay. So then marriage, non-secular sham. He gives the definition of non-secular sham. Means a policy, a course, or principle. He's giving definitions for the liberals because they're lost. Parity marriage only gives the definition of parity marriage. Parity marriage means any form of alleged marriage that does not involve a man or a woman. The term parity marriage refers to a variety of so-called marriages that do not involve a man and a woman that amount to doctrines that are inseparably linked to the religion of secular humanism. The term parity marriage refers to the so-called marriage between more than two people, persons of the same sex, or a person and an animal, or a person and an object. This is the same guy that sued to marry his laptop because it has female-like features. He was trying to prove a point. Religion, secular humanism, secular policy. He just goes on tons of court cases, case law, and definitions. So I just wanted to go Facebook Live. Is gay marriage natural? Is it neutral? Does it lead to human, no, it's very controversial. Does it lead to human flourishing? No. Like, human flourishing would be the natural act of me drinking. That's natural, neutral, leads to me flourishing, using the restroom all night. But marriage, yeah, we're not, okay, so we looked psychotic 4 years ago. Now people are going to be like, turn around every now and then I get a little enlightened. Yeah, it's time to wakey, eggs and bakey. They weren't going to stop with abortion. We are now funding transgender ideology on our kids. We're now making sure that they're educated in gender identity. We're not on school boards, so we have no say. We don't go to PTA. We've totally abandoned our Christian authority. I was like, I'm a new Christian, and so when I hear people talk about Christian authority, I'm like, where are you hiding that Christian? Where are you hiding that Christian authority? Because I definitely don't see it. So anyways, I love you guys. Make good choices. Had to go Facebook Live. And just a reminder, I am the face of redemption. I've slept with just as many girls as boys. And I love Jesus. I'm the face of redemption. And I hate sin. Sexual sin is a sin above all others. Yeah, and we're seeing pedophilia normalized. We're seeing the repercussions. Oh, it's a slippery slope. Yes, it was. Make good choices.